The chief insights and analytics officer at Procter & Gamble was telling me at a conference I ran a couple of weeks ago that research studies that used to take 3 or 4 weeks now take a week. What used to cost $30,000 now costs less than $1,000. Yeah, that means you can deploy it more frequently in more countries, across more brands, across more business questions.
Every product, design, and business decision we make is powered by insights. Will AI help all of us to make better strategic decisions? For 2 decades, David Boyle has been working with the biggest brands in the world to deliver insights that inform global strategies. We discuss the future of insights and strategy in an era of AI.
You've got to put the work in, you've got to practice, you've got to try, you've got to experiment. So that does take time. That takes an incentive, which if you're personally motivated, that's great. But probably it takes a corporate incentive, a leadership challenge, and an encouragement.
This is episode 25, and we're discussing Faster, Cheaper, Better, AI's transformation of insights and strategy. We talk about how AI is transforming the speed and impact of research, how we're getting better answers and more informed strategies, why organizations must foster a cultural shift to take advantage of AI, that AI can be confidently, persuasively wrong, and that experts will always be critical to evaluating AI outputs.
These language models, in particular AI, can be wrong, particularly if used poorly. And when it's wrong, it's confidently wrong. It's confidently, eloquently, compellingly, and persuasively wrong. And so if you're not an expert in the topic that you're using it for, then good luck working out what's true and what's not.
David Boyle helps organizations grow by using AI and by finding hidden truths in their audience data. David built the insights team that transformed EMI Music to put audiences at the heart of decisions. He went on to leadership roles at BBC, Masterclass, and Harrods before founding Audience Strategies in 2019. David is the lead author of the Prompt series of books, which offer practical guides for using language models across different industries. Drawing on his background in analytics and strategy, he's become a leading voice in how organizations can harness AI's potential while avoiding its pitfalls. He sees language models as an electric bike for the mind, a powerful multiplier that still needs human steering. Having worked with dozens of the world's leading companies, David brings a grounded perspective on AI adoption. Thank you for listening to the Design of AI podcast. Our mission is to improve how AI is leveraged. We interview leaders at the forefront of AI to unpack strategies and lessons for designers and product teams. If you like learning about AI and how to grow your career, make sure to follow us on your favorite podcasting app. It also really helps if you leave reviews. This episode was hosted by Arpi Drake-Figueredo, the founder and head of product strategy for PH1 Research, and Brittany Hobbs, VP Insights at Huge. Please make sure to subscribe to our Substack to get the most important strategy, news, and training insights at designofai.substack.com.
David, thank you so much for joining us. You've had a fascinating career and helped many industry-leading organizations to understand their audiences. So where does your passion to deeply understand audiences come from?
Well, that's a good question to start with. I think I stumbled across audience research in strategy consulting, where we were trying to use data of every kind to solve big strategy questions. And audience research was a strange one for me because it was kind of siloed off somewhere in the organization at the client. The strategy people often didn't have access to the data. They had a presentation, but not the data, maybe. It was kind of hard to get hold of and kind of expensive and all this weird stuff. But we got it. It was really, 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 really powerful. And I just felt like if we could do it like quicker, better, if we could like inject it more into the strategy process, then of course the strategy people would use it more. So I guess I kind of went on a bit of an adventure, like testing that theory out and trying to find ways in which it could be done in a way that actually impacted strategy. I just felt like that was a fun problem and an important problem to solve.
Silly question. Why have you found then that market research is usually separate from strategy?
I think historically, research people have typically not had the same kind of skills that you would need to be in a strategy conversation. They're typically, by their nature, are really curious about people, are really curious about why people do the things that they do, and really important stuff like that. Experts are asking thoughtful questions, but not necessarily experts at driving concrete recommendations that take into account the kind of the strategy of the business, the issues and challenges, the macro kind of economic situation the business is facing. And so I think there's just been a bit of a gap there, actually. And the strategy team don't have research skills and don't work well with them, and and vice versa as well. So there's often this silo. So one of the big themes in the industry, like how do we break down this silo and get strategy people into the research team, and then also get research people into the strategy team as well.
I think one of the themes that's going to come out of this conversation is whether now researchers are more equipped to become strategists, or strategists are more equipped to become researchers. But before we dive into that, in 2022, you co-authored a series of books called Prompts. You were ahead of the game. You wanted to provide practical guides to help people understand, how do you do this brand growth stuff with ChatGPT? What is ChatGPT? What is prompting? Any of this stuff. You went on to write a ton of versions, which is really great, really helpful, particularly in that time. You had some for startups, podcasters, real estate, TV, all kinds of niche stuff. So that was 2 years ago. Why did you decide to be one of the first to jump into that arena and say, this is going to be a real thing?
Well, I would say decide is a very strong word. That makes it sound very deliberate and organized, doesn't it? So a better question would be why did we end up in that world? Because it was very much a journey. By that point, me and my team had spent nearly a decade doing pretty impactful work in turning audience research into strategy work in big corporations in the music industry, television, book publishing, luxury goods. We were quite happily running a little consulting business, doing that for lots of really fun brands. But then this weird thing comes along called ChatGPT, and we were not expecting it. We were not planning for it. But it knocked our socks off because suddenly it could do some things that we thought were really special about what we did. And it could help us do a lot of things that we thought were really tough things that we'd spent years and years like honing our craft on. And I guess there's a couple of things you do in that situation. You run away or you run towards the thing. And we ran towards it. And we thought, wow, there's ways this can help us do our jobs better, help us be quicker at what it is we do. And thirdly, help us have more fun, because it's a lot more fun doing this work with an AI assistant by your side than doing it by yourself. And then pretty quickly, within a week or so, a friend twisted our arm and said, look, you're pretty good at this. You should write that down. You should share it with other people. So we decided to get the book out and share it with as many people as we could, which started then. The first year of ChatGPT was going around to other industries that we didn't know quite as well, like screenwriters in Hollywood or Grammy Award winning songwriters or real estate professionals, industries we didn't know, and saying, hey, do the same rules work in your industry? Are the same tips and tricks work there? Like, what lessons can we learn by working with you on these things? Just building up our knowledge and spreading the word as far as possible. So why did we do it? I don't know, but we thought it was incredibly important, incredibly impactful, and needed to be lent into and not run away from. So a good chance to help people, I think.
It doesn't seem like your arm needed that much twisting.
A strange idea, writing a book. It wasn't something we set out to do at all. And honestly, I think if Alistair hadn't recommended it to us, I honestly think we wouldn't have thought of it. It turned out to be a great idea. So thanks, Alistair.
No, we all need an Alistair in our lives. I think it's really fantastic because oftentimes, especially in research and strategy, we find ourselves gatekeeping and not necessarily like running away from that technology, but often being nervous, I guess, about giving people a peek behind the curtain and losing a competitive advantage, or, especially when we need to be vulnerable and go into industries that we don't know, we're often really scared of that. So I think it's amazing that you just dove right into it. Now, 2 years later, since having done that initial work, how do you see AI changing the world of strategy and insight?
I think some of the themes from 2 years ago still absolutely hold true today. And then there's some new themes that have become clearer or enabled by technology. Most of the truths were there 2 years ago, and that is that every single thing we do as knowledge workers, as people who think or write or research for a living, every single thing we do can be helped by this technology. That's a really, really bold, really, really big statement with tons of implications. Originally, we used to say, trust us, because we're experts in market research and strategy, and we tell you this is the case, But within 6 months, we said, you don't need to trust us anymore. There's plenty of great academic studies that have carefully tested this with real human beings, and it turns out to be true. And so we're not debating anymore whether it's very, very helpful for everything we do all day. It is, and you should all believe it. And the question then is how you get to the point where you can use it and how you integrate it into all the different tasks you do. That turned out to be relatively hard, actually. Even though the lessons, the tips and the tricks were in our book late 2022, It takes a while to learn lessons, tips, and tricks, especially if we're old, especially if we're busy in our jobs and haven't got time to stop what we're doing and and practice and try something that has failures and errors and weird things going on. So it's been an incredible journey to work out how to actually get teams to use this well. We know you can, we know you should, right? But how? And then after that, you really got to see the implications working through. And so it comes back to those three things that I mentioned earlier. So almost everything we do can be a bit quicker and sometimes a lot quicker. And that changes everything about how we do research projects, how we communicate to stakeholders, how we scope research, everything at all. Everything can be a little bit better. That changes the type of work we can do. We can do slightly better work in slightly more products or slightly different industries, or have slightly more nuanced recommendations or bolder or clearer recommendations. And then everything we do can be happier, is the word we use, but more fun. And so those things that used to be an incredible chore to us can now be a joy. For me, expert interviews was an incredible chore. It was one of my first jobs out of university, expert interviews. I hated it. I was terrible at it. I had to take notes and I wasn't good at it. At the end of a long day, you've got to write up your key conclusions and send them to the consultant. I hated it. I pretended people weren't available on the phone. I couldn't get them and they didn't answer questions because I just hated it. I was really bad. Now, 25 years later, I'm back at that same company teaching them how to use AI to do that thing, which is so much fun because it's now something I enjoy. And I take every opportunity to do expert interviews because I love doing it with my little AI helper. It takes the pain out of work as well and makes it much more fun. I don't know if you answered your question, but the answer is absolutely everything all the time and on those three dimensions.
That's the best answer. I love it. So, you mentioned about having an AI helper to take notes for you, which I think is a fabulous use case of AI. Are there any other examples that you can share of how AI is changing brand building and audience growth?
Yeah, and I think if I might teach a little lesson along the way as well, there are four things that AIs are very, very good at helping with in general. And so the first is synthesis. It's taking a bunch of text, actually non-numbers, text, and then distilling it, finding themes, finding patterns, transforming it into a summary, a different version, maybe an alternate perspectives, or translating something from one industry to another. These are all synthesis tasks. And there's so many ways that we could use that more than when we used to do it manually, or better or quicker. The second is learning. So whenever we tackle a new topic or a new industry or a new country or a new type of consumer, it can help us to learn about them by either searching the web and finding accurate information that's recent and that's sourced, or by using the knowledge it acquired during its training. And that works for big topics and deep insights. But we can learn a lot more. We can ask more questions, be more curious at every step of the process, and get answers more rapidly. That's amazing as well. The third is thinking. And so that might be thinking through like how to structure a research project, how to respond to a brief, or what client needs we focus a project on. It might be thinking through the implications of what people said in research, or it might be thinking through the implications of the research to the client. Quite often we get to the end of a research project, we're pretty tired, we've been in it for a long while, we've got our conclusions, and we just kind of throw them across the wall to the stakeholder. Now you can easily think through the implications to lots of different stakeholders because AI can help you to think. That's amazing. Or ideate is the other word that goes with think. So, what are five possible implications of this great insight? What are five possible reactions we might do to this need consumers have? So, ideational thinking. And the last is writing. This is another area where researchers typically fail. We sometimes put taglines on charts or taglines on slides, and then but you have to be in the room to hear the description for it to really make sense. Well, now we can write beautifully and eloquently. We can put the slide in and say to the AI, explain this chart for me to my stakeholders. And they can get beautiful reports which eloquently describe the issues and challenges and methodologies and implications, and we summarize it for different stakeholders or different use cases. So I hate to keep coming back to this theme, but it really is every single part of the research process, and what you do with those gifts and those superpowers along the way and how you apply it to make research better, that's up to you. But the gift is every single thing we do.
If I think about what you just said and what others have said before about leveraging AI, one of the things that I've seen is that it gives you an opportunity to get feedback at stages at which you previously would have felt too uncomfortable, perhaps, to ask for feedback. And I find it's remarkable because it's almost like these GLP drugs where we're trying to deal with the symptom rather than the culture. I hope that one day we kind of have come to terms about what it means about us that we need a technology to help us see the work we're doing from another lens. What do you think about that? Having spoken to many researchers.
When research is radically quicker, when it's radically cheaper, therefore when it's better, and when it's easier for your team to do, you can deploy it in many more ways. For example, you might have only had the budget or the time to do a study at one point in the process. You can now do studies once a week. The chief insights analytics officer at Procter and Gamble was telling me at a conference I ran a couple of weeks ago that research studies that used to take 3 or 4 weeks now take a week. What used to cost $30,000 now costs less than $1,000. Yeah, that means you can deploy it more frequently in more countries, across more brands, across more business questions. What you do with that benefit is up to you. Cost saving or expansion of remit and service levels, that's absolutely up to you as a leader.
Please make sure to subscribe to our Substack to get the most important strategy, news, and training insights at designofai.substack.com.
Now, one of the other reality checks that we've had brought up in our conversations has been that adoption's typically much lower than we observe or than we hear. Now, in your conversations, what are you hearing? Is adoption in the research, insights, and strategy community as low as in other industries? And again, the situation that we keep hearing is that leadership want AI. The individual contributors wish they could use it, but don't have the time to figure it out. And that generally speaking, there's no strategy in place, and there's fear and there's uncertainty, regulation, all these sorts of things. So typically it's a small minority who are speaking very loudly about this. What does it look like in the marketing, research, and brand world?
Yeah, that all sounds very true. And I should say, yeah, we've done deep work in the market research world, but also in everything from corporate communications to, as I say, screenwriting or script writing, through to leadership teams and consulting. And so I've seen all of them. I think market researchers tend to settle on a methodology. And once you've mastered that methodology, market researchers typically are not as nimble as you might hope and embracing new methodologies or new ways of doing things. And so I think, compared to other types of work, that there is some active resistance in the market research world to this. I think also, in their fairness, as I said earlier, this is hard to do, actually. And so whilst there's a free book called Prompt for Brands, which tells you everything you need to know on this topic, you've got to put the work in beyond downloading the book for free. You've got to put the work in, you've got to practice, you've got to try, you've got to experiment. So that does take time. That takes an incentive, which if you're personally motivated, that's great. But probably it takes a corporate incentive, a leadership challenge, and an encouragement. It takes permission as well. Like, you have to be given tools that you're allowed to upload proprietary information into. Many people simply don't have those yet. Companies have not pushed the button on rolling out AIs that are capable. And then a lot of people simply say, well, David, I really want to learn this. Thank you for the training session. But beyond the training session, my calendar is so full. I can't sit at my desk and practice this stuff. My boss needs to clear some time for me and give me time and a mandate to actually invest. Then there's other things like stigmas around using it and misconceptions and all sorts of things. So the answer is, I'm very sorry to say that it's quite a hard process. Even though we know exactly how to use them well, we know all the use cases, it's all written down and it's free in the book. To actually get across the line with a team really using it does take time, effort, leadership, permission, tooling, all sorts of other things. So yeah, smart people will pick it up, work it out with ChatGPT on their own in their own life. But to bring it into the corporate world requires a lot of extra stuff. And I'd say, yeah, programming is the field where it's most naturally been adopted. And it seems to be pretty standard in any kind of modern, they're doing coding. A lot of places still aren't using it. There's still work to do, even there. But outside of that, I don't think there are any categories or types of job where it's widely commonplace in the corporate world yet, unfortunately.
And do you find that adoption is higher in any particular vertical or industry or type of role right now? Is there one that seems to be leading the pack? Or similar to our recent conversations, is it more of a generational thing where young people are more willing to experiment?
It's a generational thing for sure. Younger people are more happy with ambiguity and with non-deterministic answers. Older people get stuck in the idea that, well, it's different every time. That seems strange. Or, well, I sometimes can't rely on it. Well, therefore I can never rely on it, And so, yeah, there's definitely some of that. That's, by the way, very easy to overcome. We do a lot of one-on-ones with senior leaders or CEOs even. If you give them a safe space to be honest about their challenges, you can very quickly overcome those challenges and get them using the thing, which I take as a good personal challenge. So I do think it's very, 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 very mixed. I think it depends on the job you do. Very simply, the more text that comes your way, the better suited you are to use these things. And so some people simply don't do a lot of writing or don't do a lot of reading. Their job doesn't require it. And so it's harder, not hard, but harder to find use cases. If you have a lot of reports coming your way, you need to synthesize, or a lot of open-ended comments coming your way, you need to synthesize, or you do a lot of communication, a lot of writing, then these naturally suit AI. If you do a lot of numbers work, you probably don't start with AI. It's probably other things to do. But no, I really think it's very, very mixed. The only dimension I found that's very useful is, well, it's not very useful, but it's insightful, is that there are some people who love the idea of semi-automating their work. I always have. If there's a way that I can, instead of me doing it, have my team do it, great. If there's a way instead of them doing it, we can have a machine do it, great. Because there's loads more we can do. And the sooner we get the stuff that we've now mastered off our plates, the sooner we can move on to other stuff. We've always thought that way and built those systems, which might be why we led into this. There is a type of person, God love them, who does not want to do that under any circumstances whatsoever. They love handcrafting audience segments, possibly, or handcrafting communications, or they love writing a song from scratch originally with no support or inspiration, whatsoever. I think of it as a bit like the farmer's market in the world of farming. Like, there will always be a role for people who want to do small batch, handcrafted artisan work.
Most of our audience are builders, so not necessarily handcrafted, or they probably wouldn't be here. These are people who are working on product teams or working at agencies, and they've grown accustomed to research being synonymous with testing. They're thinking about tactical execution level questions, which generally are maybe a little easier for us to offload, right? So when they're thinking about that kind of execution level question, what should they be leveraging AI to do? Like, how do you expect that those types of careers would shift over the coming years?
Well, I think we talked about this briefly earlier, in the sense that I think you can just do a lot more research now. Once you've mastered these skills, these foundational skills, and how to work well with a language model, really foundational skills, the same skills you'll use to write letters to your family, the same skills you'll use in your hobbies, the same skills you'll use in testing and every other part of your job, the same skills. Once you've mastered those skills, you'll just be able to do a lot more research, a lot more testing. You'll be able to think about the scope of it more clearly, and maybe come up with new ideas for the scope of testing that you might do in the first place. You'll be able to plan tests more quickly, more rapidly. You'll be able to communicate those tests to your leadership team, to your teams, more clearly, to get them on board or get their feedback, because you'll write them up more thoughtfully. You'll be able to analyze more, particularly more open-ended responses than you did before, or even more videos of user interaction, or more video feedback, which was a pain and costly before, now is close to zero cost of analyzing. So you'll analyze a lot more richly. You'll ask more questions of that feedback that you do get, and use it for more decisions. You'll find more insights from it, helpfully, with AI as well. But once you found the insights, you'll communicate those more clearly to the business. You'll get buy-in more clearly, more quickly, for the types of decision you want to make, the kind of next steps you want. More action will happen as a result. But I genuinely think all of those things will happen. But I hear what you're saying about testing versus strategy. And this is a kind of frustration of mine with the research world. We spend, as a field, we spend too much time on tactical execution and optimization, and not enough time on strategy work. Well, everybody can now do some strategy work, and it might not be great, but everybody can now ask a language model to step back and think about, and the phrase I would use is the deep underlying needs that might cause a user to want to engage with my product or platform or brand. Everybody now has that capability of exploring those, thinking those through, and thinking about the implications of deep category related needs, deep underlying needs for their product or their testing or their brand. And that wasn't the gift of most people before. Most people were stuck with whatever the research team gave them, because that's quite hard to think through. But everybody can now elevate research to that higher level, and that's a real gift.
I have some concerns myself working in this industry and feeling like there's an expectation that everything needs to be faster than fast, and having no time to really even be strategic in the way that we think about those questions or about those studies. But I'd like to ask you, like, do you feel that increased speed is good for research? Should researchers be focused then on getting deeper into specific questions and having fewer questions, but doing those questions more often? Or should we be working on projects more shallowly, where we're just really quickly going through and answering more things more quickly, if we are going to just continue down this path of exponential speed?
I do think we're stuck in life, which is that everything goes quicker every year. I think it did before computers to post computers. It did computers to the internet, internet to social, and social to AI. I think every one of those has brought the ability to communicate more rapidly and think more rapidly and do more and be in more countries and more platforms. And so everything's quicker and more complex than it was. We're stuck on that never ending cycle. And so I find it very uncomfortable, and I think there's a lot to worry about just doing more frequently. That pace of life is radically different for me now than it was 2 years ago, before, or 2 years and 2 weeks ago, before ChatGPT launched. And so that is the reality. I think it always has been the reality as well, except we've had this little step change. I don't think it stops strategy or blocks strategy, because I think you can be strategic at that pace now. I do much more research for many more brands in many more countries than I used to. But every one, I think, is massively elevated in terms of how deeply it goes into the underlying audience needs at one end, how clearly it articulates the so whats and the implications for the business at the other end. I think we used to do the middle bit very, very well, but now we can do more and faster and cheaper. So I don't think it has to come at the cost of anything other than pace of life. It's going fast.
At the beginning, we highlighted the possibility that more researchers can do strategy and more strategists can do research. What are you seeing happen more often right now from your conversations? Is it more researchers taking on that strategic work as a result of AI, or is it more strategists and product managers and program managers skipping the researcher, instead doing it themselves?
Actually, there's a middle ground, I think, where strategists are increasingly taking over research teams. So people from a strategy background saying, well, I think I could make that team run well, and running the team. I think there's a real danger when a strategist tries to do research themselves, because these language models, in particular AI, can be wrong, particularly if used poorly. And when it's wrong, it's confidently wrong. It's confidently, eloquently, compellingly, and persuasively wrong. And so if you're not an expert in the topic that you're using it for, then good luck working out what's true and what's not. An example I like to give, I was working with a Hollywood screenwriter, and she had sent me some material, and we were testing this thing out. I said, all right, I'm going to write the outline of scene one based on this material. I wrote out the outline of scene one. I was very pleased with it. And I sent it back to her, and I said, see, I told you AI can do a cracking job at writing a scene. You didn't believe me, but look, here it is. And she laughed. She laughed so loudly. She said, that's an absolutely terrible scene. And here's all the reasons why. And to me, I thought, well, this is great. So you have to be an expert to use AI well. And so I would dabble in qualitative insight analysis myself, because I now can. But if it was important and if very serious business implications are resting on it, I would give that work to somebody who's an expert researcher, because they know all the biases and subtleties to look for and the right questions to ask, the wrong questions to ask. They'll sense check it and triangulate it against other areas. So yeah, strategists doing research, I think that's a problem for anything other than light reads. But strategists being more intimately ingrained with the research team and or running the research teams, I think is an incredible idea, and seems to work very well. I've met a number of people in that role recently, and they've had a great success.
Now, you use the word confidence, and I love this word because when I use these tools, It gives me an inflated sense of confidence that I'm capable at things that perhaps I'm atrocious at. The other day, I was having some drinks and I started writing scripts of hybrids of shows and mashups. And I thought I was absolutely brilliant in that moment. But these tools don't give you that reality check. They don't tell you heat check saying, you're not really that funny. You're not really that good. How can we as individuals who are experts, usually in one or two domains, really, and you use the word researcher, but researchers are a blend of maybe 20 or 30 skills. I'm exceptionally good at maybe two of those, but it might inflate my ego to think I'm good at 15 or 20 of those. How can we have an interplay with our colleagues or with these tools so that we use the tools to enhance what we're great at, not take over other people's domains that we should be collaborating more effectively with?
Yeah, I think that's a perfect call to arms, actually. I think there's two angles to it that sound important to me. The first is about foundational skills. And this is really what the books that we wrote try to achieve and our training tries to achieve. And what I would advocate to people as being the thing that will help you in all of this, everything we've talked about today, which is if you know how to use these things well, if you've learned the rules, the tips, the tricks, the guidelines, and if you've practiced, then you actually know you have a pretty good feeling actually of what a good use case, a bad case is, how you need to check something, what you need to check, that kind of thing. You build up that. So I think in practical terms, once you build that up, you make fewer mistakes and you're overly confident fewer times. I think that's half the problem. I think the other half is honesty, transparency, and culture in organizations. And so in the old days, if you sent a paper to a colleague, they would think to themselves, you've obviously spent a long time on this paper. These are your deep entrenched views. You care passionately about it. You've reasoned on this topic and you are standing behind this thing with all your might. And so, yeah, I'm sure that's fine. Quite a lot of the time. Whereas now, if you've used AI lightly in an area outside your expertise, if you've got the confidence to say to your colleague, hey, this might look really professional, it might be quite a long paper and it might be eloquently argued, but you know what? I hold these views very lightly because they're outside my area of expertise. So don't judge it by the look and feel of the document. Give me honest feedback. Then you can do things which are wrong and they'll get fixed really quickly by your colleagues. So I think a culture of openness and honesty about, is this a very thoughtful project I spent my life on, or did I just spin this up in 5 minutes over coffee and send it to you? Just be honest about the two, and don't be intimidated when you receive work from other people. So I think culture needs to change a lot, as well as the training, the foundational skills.
Yeah, I think culture is a really interesting topic because I personally have struggled with constantly being faced, unexpectedly so, with internal cultures that don't want to change. And I find that even when people are comfortable working faster and using these tools, we still butt up against these cultural norms that are maybe incorrect or aren't serving what we as practitioners, as teams, as collaborators need, right? And again, I think my personal worry with the pace of work and with the expectation that comes with that is that's just going to continue to increase anxiety, to increase the pressure that people feel to perform versus taking a step back and identifying like what is the right part of why we're doing this work, or what ways in which a culture needs to change, whether that's internally for our own teams, for ourselves personally, or for the clients we're working on. And so how can we shift this to try and use the work that we're doing and these like micro projects rather than these big macro projects, but these smaller projects that are iterating, how can we use this to be a time of maybe more positive change rather than just speed for the sake of completion?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think you're absolutely right on that challenge. I quite enjoy speed. I quite relish the idea I can do more in the time I have, but not everybody does, and that's okay. So on the one hand, you've got a challenge, which is that if a senior person can open ChatGPT and get most of the way there in 10 minutes, it's just not going to be okay for the junior person to say, I need a week to do this. And this is the kind of discrepancy we're talking about here. And on the one hand, it's just not okay. On the other hand, it's always better if the expert does it, the junior person who's actually got skills in that area, if they do that thing, if they're actually a specialist in that task, it's always better if they do it. So a responsible leader, I think, would say, I get that it will take you a week. I could do it in 5 minutes. Let me invest time, effort, money, and tooling and policies in making sure that you've got the support you need, so that I know you're a week now, but I want you to get to the point where you're comfortable and happy and enjoying doing more, but in a quicker time period. But let me give you the skills. A responsible leader.
I think part of it is also, though, that the type of output that we need to have changes, right? Like, you're not, like, one of the things that I'm constantly trying to drill home with people is we no longer live in the world of a research readout. Personally, I believe is I don't find that there's value in doing research for the sake of having a research readout and then sharing that, and it taking maybe a couple of weeks to do that, and then someone having to take that and then reinterpret it. I believe that as a researcher, you are better equipped to think more strategically and to collaborate more with other teams. And I think part of that is also changing that culture of what does it mean to be a researcher. And so we as leaders need to find new ways to change those cultures internally to say you are now more empowered because you have these tools or things like that. So I think partly it's time, and partly it's about being more open to what that output looks like as well.
Yeah, absolutely. On the topic of output, I think a good example is, let's take qualitative research or expert interviews or user interviews. In the old world, you would take the transcripts, maybe if you had transcripts, and you would read them, and then you would write down, probably in a PowerPoint, what you thought the answer was, and you give the leadership team the PowerPoint, that was it. In the new world, the transcripts are processed real time to tease out insights. So they're drip fed to any stakeholder who really cares about it, so that they can change the course of the interview program if they need during the program itself. Second, the body of transcripts are dumped into a custom GPT alongside the insights that are given to the leader, so they can ask questions of the body of work, of the sum total of all the transcripts. They can query and challenge and test their hypothesis against those transcripts and all sorts of other things. That was unthinkable before, but it's a really different workflow for a researcher. So I think we're not escaping the point that it just has to be quicker in the new world. It also has to be different. I really stand by my point, though, which is that whenever I've sat with somebody to re-engineer a task or a process or a system, we've ended with everybody being happier, even the most junior people. No one's grinding at a machine here or doing menial repetitive work. Even the most junior people are amazed at the power they suddenly have and how much more they can do. So speed, I don't think we can avoid. I'm sorry about that, because that is a stress for some people, but I think it's still better for almost everybody, and if done well and responsibly.
Okay, so let's push this further. I want to challenge you to a rapid fire series of questions about how will different spaces be disrupted, right? How can we rethink how we can use these and what we can do? Interpret this or answer this how you want, but I'd love to just really quickly for each of these understand your answer on how you think it'll be disrupted because of AI. So first one, brand building.
Much, 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 much better, more thoughtful brands out in the world.
Being an artist.
I feel sorry for artists who don't want to use AI to help them do what they do. I think they'll struggle, but I think artists can be 100% artists. Their creativity can be completely intact, and they could use AI to have a much bigger impact in the world.
Oh, I like that answer. Conducting research.
Better, quicker, happier, and much cheaper.
The researchers being happier or the clients being happier?
Good point. Both. It's a
Okay.
great thing for research. It's great for research for everybody in the whole value chain, unless you resist. It's great for everybody who doesn't resist.
Okay. Developing strategies.
More, better considered, actually used, translated into action much more. It's rare now, and it shouldn't be. It should be really common.
What about the agency model?
If your agency relies on software, then watch out, because there's cost of writing code has dropped massively and you risk being disrupted. If you bill by the hour, good luck, because we're doing things quicker now. But if you're willing to re-engineer your processes and your products, and if you're willing to price differently, and if the heart of your agency, if the essence of why you get out of bed in the morning is something that's incredibly valuable, your perspective, your point of view on the world, then you're going to be just fine in an AI world. If you're slightly lazily milking an AI, a legacy code base or a legacy methodology, then good luck.
Okay, how will the value of insights be disrupted by AI?
The value of insights, that's interesting. I think the net result is vastly more insight being used for vastly more brands in more countries for more decisions more frequently. So insight used to be the big brands in the big countries for the big decisions, and it's cascading down and down and down and down and down. It's got a long way to go. So insight everywhere, all the time, for everything. That is the magical future for sure. Yeah, and I think that makes insight skills more valuable. And do you need to do, is your role different? Yes. But are your skills more valuable in the new world? Yes, they're absolutely more valuable. So find new ways to deploy them.
And the last one, the concept of trust.
I mean, I think that's going to take a kicking, isn't it? Because AIs are more persuasive than humans. They're confidently wrong. I can't tell AI video from human video, AI art from human art, AI music from real music, AI insights from real insights in industries I don't know well. And so we've passed the point on most things where you just can't tell, and so trust needs to mean something different in the new world. Whoa, that's a good one.
That's one that I'm still trying to think through. Kind of in that vein of trust and research and whatnot. Research is a scientific practice. It's something that helps us understand the world around us and build global industries and, make the world more accessible. Every year, as I get deeper into my career, I get this sense of feeling like you can and should be able to have more impact. Working in agencies or working in product, it feels like industries are valuing research less, and that we're kind of seeing this divide, right? Where it's becoming more transactional. It's becoming much more about, well, how do we just validate something that's been done? Or how do we identify what color button we should use? Which isn't really allowing us to have that seat at the table or create the impact that then trickles down to the products that get made. Questions are being asked of audiences, but people aren't necessarily listening because it's already been scoped out. So it feels like a checkmark activity. Help me see the light at the end of that tunnel, right? How can we rebuild the practice of research so that those of us who want to be more at the strategic start are able to?
Yeah, and so when I started my agency, which is now 5 years ago, I vividly remember sitting in a pub with my notebook and my pen, thinking about what I wanted the agency to do. And it wasn't obvious to me, by the way, because I'd done lots of different things in my career at that point. And I settled on the name Audience Strategies because I decided that that was the thing that I'd seen happen that was most impactful but most underused. And so when customers or consumers are thought of as audiences, not consumers, and when they are put at the heart of strategy, it is completely magical to brands, commercial brands, artists, and others, music artists like David Guetta or Katy Perry or the Beatles or Pink Floyd or luxury brands I'd worked with or TV shows like Doctor Who. When you get to the point where the senior team really understand the audience that they're trying to reach, and when you see that cascade through everything they do all the time, in the world of business strategy, I'd say that not really happen enough. So for sure, it is the biggest goal for researchers, and it's critically needed by brands. I actually feel like more people are recognizing that these days. I think that more people are recognizing that although the research teams have been historically, sometimes too often, slow, expensive, inflexible, uninsightful, not appropriately understanding strategy, that has been historic problem. Whilst that's been the case, there's enough examples now where it's working really, 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 really well. So I think most senior leaders want or expect Insight to be playing that role. They're not always sure how to get there. And so there's an insight transformation process required to re-engineer Insight to get there. They're not quite sure who to call. So having a name that has an audience and strategies in the name really helps. I think the need is there and the want is there. I think it's our job to help people see that path, to help them see what it is we can do to enable that. What is our manifesto, our point of view, our perspective, our solution to that problem. So I have hope that it's just about connecting the dots now. I'm very positive and optimistic.
Wonderful. Now, my focus is much more on the product side of things, some of the agencies as well, but generally these are people who are getting rushed to get answers or rushed to validate things. They're rushed in so many ways because there's already deadlines and they have giant roadmaps and they just got to get it done. But at the same time, in this field, there's an increasing need to do foundational research. But a lot of these teams aren't equipped to do foundational research because generally academics are brought in to do that. But nonetheless, these teams are being asked to boil the ocean, as they say. How should product teams and agencies be leveraging AI to overcome some of these barriers and get the answers that would be impactful or that could actually transform what they're doing?
I recognize the problem, first of all, having worked with product teams closely in tech companies. So I really see that pain. I don't know the answer. One thing you can do if you're in that position is to sketch an answer to the research that you want using AI. And so I'll give you a non-product example, but there was a big global entertainment company and they had about £500 million of investments they're about to make, and there was no market research. And so we worked with their insight team to just use AI to work out for each of the investments the impact it would have on different audience groups, the audience segments, and took that to the board just as a straw man to say, hey, look, these investments are coming anyway. Here's the kind of insight that you need, the kind of logic. And this is a rough estimate of the kind of segments and the kind of rationale behind each of the investments. That really catalyzed thinking. It was, by the way, I think good enough to make a bunch of decisions because it was run by experts, but also it kickstarted the research program to do that properly, to actually interview consumers and do qual and quant in multiple countries and actually do the work required. So it unlocked the investment by showing what the answer kind of might or should or kind of could look like. And that's in the gift of even the most junior product manager now. And if you don't know how to do that, that's fine, because you know what? AI can teach you how to do that as well as doing it for you. And so don't stand by it because you're not an expert in that topic, but you can say, look, I want something that looks like this. Look, and hey, leadership, if you had something that looked like this, wouldn't that be great? We used to not deliver that sketch until the end of a big research project before. We deliver that now on day one, and the research project is about validating and refining and enhancing it. So that power is given to anybody. Just don't bet big on it unless you're a researcher.
Good enough is a term that's used way too often in product world. And when we think about research, what good enough looks like is sampling bias error. It is basically speaking to the wrong people, asking the wrong questions. Now, AI compounds this because if you have the wrong methods going in, if you're asking the wrong prompts, asking the wrong questions, AI will spew out nonsense quite a lot. Yesterday, I was doing desk research on something and it created and fabricated something for me, and it doesn't flag it in any way. So combine that with sampling error and methods inappropriately used. How can the average user of these tools navigate that and overcome that?
Let's break the problems down. So the first problem is somebody is using basically the wrong methodology, like asking the wrong questions of the wrong sample. And I've been in that world and seen that fix those problems in my past as well, more than one time. And so how can AI help with that? Well, I guess what it could do is help that person to think through, if they were curious, to think through the methodology in the first place. So you get a pitch from an agency, let's say, or you're scoping a research project, let's say, you can put that into the AI. If you're curious, which is the barrier, you can put that into the AI and say, hey, I'm thinking about this methodology. What might I be missing? And what ways in which might it not be the best thing for me? If you're curious, you can now learn in that way. You couldn't before. That was really hard in the past. And so maybe it could fix methodological mistakes, again, by people who are curious. Then you got AI hallucination as the like technical term for an AI giving a kind of incorrect answer. That I have to say is much less of a problem with good foundational skills. So I'll keep coming back to this idea that we should all have these good foundational skills. If you know what questions to ask, what not to ask, how to ask a question, how not to ask a question, how to manage the context length when it starts to drift or get anchored, and that kind of thing, then you encounter many fewer hallucinations. Also, if you're aware of them, you can do at least a couple of things. You can ask it to only answer in situations where it's confident, because genuinely they know when they're not confident, actually. So, there's a bunch of kind of just foundational skills. They will not fix the hallucination problem. Absolutely, they will not. But they will mean it's far less common and far easier to kind of to detect and sense check. For example, I might do a piece of work in one window. So I start with some source material, derive some things from it, end with my conclusions. I might then put just the source and the conclusions into a completely separate chat and say, hey, try and deliberately provoke it. Say, hey, sense check these and find the errors for me. Not, is this good? Yes, David, that's great. No, find the errors for me. And it doesn't have any evidence that it's done the work itself. So there's methods like that that you can use. So yeah, some combination of learning by inquiry and foundational skills, I'd say.
I love that piece of advice about using it to also sense check itself or to ask it to only respond when it feels confident in the response. There's a lot of people who just, especially when it comes to research, they go, this is great, I got it so fast, and they just run with it and just assume that that's exactly what it is. Do you have any final advice or insights that you would like to share with teams who are building products with AI?
I don't want to sound like a broken record, but this technology, language models in particular, are completely well established now, completely proven to be massively helpful in quality, speed, and in happiness of work. And so you've got a choice out there. You've got a choice. Do you want those benefits or not? That's up to you. Only you can do that. And if you do, we actually know how to get those benefits. My book is free. We actually know how to do it, but I'm really sorry, you've got to put the time and work in. So I think it's worth putting that time and work in. So I stopped what I was doing, cleared my calendar, and just obsessed over this when it came out. And I love my job now. It's so much more fun than it used to be with my consulting work, my strategy work, my product work. And so that is the gift that you can have as well, happiness, that joy. And but I'm really sorry, you've got to put the work in, you've got to practice, you've got to invest, you've got to, try and fail. But it's really, really worth it. And I promise you, it will change everything about how you do your job and how you feel about your job. And if you don't believe that, then reach out. I'll talk it through with you for free. Or if you struggle with that, then don't worry about that. Reach out and I'll tell you how to do it better, because it's so magic. You should be doing it.
Fabulous. I love that as our kind of closing thought. But very last thing, where is the best place for people to follow along with your writings and analysis or reach out to you?
Oh, well, you should definitely go to prompt.mba and download one of the books. As I say, they're all free. There's no hidden motive there. We're not trying to sell you anything. They're just free. Go get one for sure. Everything you need to know is in there. LinkedIn is the best place to follow me, David Boyle, and my username is Beglen. That's my middle name, Beglen, or X, FKA Twitter. Then, yeah, Beglen on there as well, my middle name, Beglen. So, yeah, or any way you like. And I would love to hear your challenges, issues, and hopes and fears.
Thank you so much, David.
Thank you. It's been a real joy.
This episode was hosted by Arpi Drag Figueredo, the founder and head of product strategy for PH1 Research, and Brittany Hobbs, VP Insights at Huge. Please make sure to subscribe to our Substack to get the most important strategy, news, and training insights at designofai.substack.com.